You, yes, you can make a difference in the world. You just have to do it. Welcome to the porch. We are Painted Porch Strategies. That's Amy. She's Sierra. I'm Rob. Each week, we gather around a book, a handbook for new Stoics. And we do this each week because there's a new lesson each week that we get to delve into as we learn Stoicism and learn to become better Stoics. This week's lesson is called Do Whatever Political Good You Can. Now, it may sound like you have to get involved in PTA meetings or voting or Congress, or politics. It's not what it means. The Stoics had a view that politics is really all of us, because the Stoics believe that in order to fulfill humans' destiny, we all have to work together as one big giant team. This is a way to do that. So, Sierra, I'd love to find out from you, as the example used in here is Malala Yousafzai, who we may remember was basically almost killed, shot in the head, because she was a female learning in school. And the Taliban did not like that. She survived and has become this worldwide ambassador for educating young women in particular. So that's the difference that she can make, not always the difference that we can all make on that large scale. But Sierra, I'd love to find out from you, what stood out to you in this lesson?
Well, the example that they gave, it is interesting because for us in the West, we think nothing of a female having the right to an education. It's a given to us, right? But in the part of the world that she lived in, that was not her reality. In her polis, which is where politics comes from, is the Greek polis, city, state, or region, or whatever, that is not the norm. And she took a lot of bravery. You talk about death threats, death assassination attempts, probably her family probably telling her not to because it would bring shame. It was not her place. But she fought for what she believed in, which was the right to an education for females. And that fight still goes on in many other parts of the world. So I think there's a twofold lesson. One is we should be grateful for the opportunities that we have. And two, we should look towards opportunities to make the world a better place. Even when you have things pretty good, things could always be better, either for you or for other people in your community, in your polis.
And that's what I think is such a great thing to think about based on this lesson. It doesn't have to be on a Malala type scale. It could be helping your neighbor. It could be helping a friend achieve a goal. That, I think, is that much more freeing aspect of Stoicism. It really gets down to person sometimes. So Amy, what about you? What were your main takeaways?
Yeah, I think when I first read this, I had an impression, just like many of us did, when it says do whatever political good you can. It was thinking immediately the jump to the politics, the getting involved in state or local affairs or becoming an advocate for XYZ cause. But this is really just saying, find something useful, find small ways that you can contribute to society, even in those little examples. And all it is meant is to help you exercise your virtue, because that's really what we're trying to do here as Stoics in training, is to be and live a more virtuous life in this world that we currently exist in. So I did really like that, because when I first read it, I thought, that's a lot. That's a heavy burden. I don't know what I could do at that level, or honestly, how much I would want to at that level. Because not all of us want to be the person marching in the march or holding the signs, but there are small things that we can all do to help our fellow man, for certain.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that it's more needed now than ever, because the current stream is to do the opposite of that, to be the opposite of virtuous, because we're surrounded by politicians who don't seem to know what virtue is, quite honestly. And then social media does not really reward virtue. It rewards tension. It rewards calling each other names. So the idea of being in this position to do whatever political good you can automatically puts you sort of against the grain. But that's okay, because you want to know who else went against the grain? Dr. Martin Luther King. He was very much against the grain. again, not saying that we all have to be Martin Luther King. That probably is an impossible goal. Edward Snowden's another guy that came to mind when it came to this, because he's a guy that did what he thought was virtuous by exposing that the United States government was essentially spying on all Americans without going through the proper constitutional context. And he became a pariah for so many. So he now lives in Russia, but he did what he thought was virtuous. And we can have disagreements on whether or not we think that is. I happen to think that he is. And those are the type of people that are willing to stand up and do the right thing, even when the world's against them. We don't even have to do that. So I want to know some examples that you guys came up with, because I'll give you this real quick. Amy actually had to remind me of one because I didn't even think about it in this context. So this past weekend, I went out running with a buddy of mine who wanted to run his own marathon, but obviously pandemic, there's no organized marathons. So I went and ran the last leg with him. And I thought, no big deal. I'm just going to help Joe and, help him get across the finish line. And Amy's like, did you write that down? I'm like, no, I didn't even think about that. That's the kind of scale we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. Doing good on that scale, doing the virtuous thing can be something that simple, something that well-intended.
Mm-hmm. It can be those small things, because those small things, all those little pebbles can add up to a really big pile. And so I think that's really important. One of the things I did like too, that they specifically pointed out, is that when it comes to identifying what types of exercises or what types of actions, political good actions you wanted to perform, they specifically call out to ensure that you're asking yourself whether your motive is purely for the benefit of other people, or if you have other motives such as virtue signaling, which we know is very prevalent nowadays, virtue signaling, or you're doing it with the hopes of getting something in return. And when you do that, that corrupts what they consider to be the pure political good, or exercising your virtue. Virtue signaling and quid pro quos are not part of your virtuous path. They can certainly benefit you, possibly, or hurt you. It depends on the situation. But making sure that it's pure of heart.
But I would actually say, Rob, that, in the most obvious sense, you're doing the last leg with Joe definitely benefited Joe, right? He had a cheerleader with him. He had somebody there to be for part of that leg. But this is where social media can be a vehicle for good. Both you and Joe shared on your social pages, at least a few that I saw, shared about having done this. So guess what? Maybe you reach a few other people who see that virtuous helping of a friend, that uplifting of a friend, and maybe that sparks an idea for somebody else to also do a virtuous good for another person. So now all of a sudden that reach has just gone to one person, Joe, and could potentially reach and branch out among a lot of other people.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. Not all social media is bad when used for the right reasons. When used for the right reasons, it can certainly be a catalyst for good.
And that's something that's very simple that we all could do. And that could profoundly change how we interact on social media. If we decided to take control instead of calling the other political side a name, or belittling someone else, or trying to make a joke at someone else's expense. If we say, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're going to be Stoics, and we're going to be virtuous about this. It wouldn't take much, I don't think, if everyone did it, even once out of every 2 posts, once out of every 3 posts. Mm-hmm. How big of a change would that make?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So see, you can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, you can make a difference.
So what did you guys write down as far as some attempted goals? Because what they have us do in this exercise is go through a week, 6 days out of 7 days of the week, and pick sort of a goal, something based on doability, as they say, that will allow us to try to achieve our virtue to help others.
So I both zoomed in and zoomed out on this one. There is a saying amongst parents that says, your greatest achievement may not be something you do, but someone you raise. And I have a very unique opportunity right now in that not only are my husband and I raising our son, but we're actually homeschooling. So when I look at that opportunity to help, and he's in kindergarten, so this is very young in his education. If we have the ability to impart a joy of learning and to impart a care and empathy for other people that are different than him, then isn't that empowering, hopefully empowering him to become a person who is a vehicle into the future for positive change in the world? And we view it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about that one.
That's a great one.
And I thought about in doing that, making sure that as we create our curriculum every week, that it's not just, addition, subtraction, letters, but that there's always a piece of that, whether it's planned or just spontaneous, about that empathy towards other people, whether it's people that believe differently, people of a different political party, all of it, right? It's all part of just that open heart and taking your education and your ability to communicate into ways that can help make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I got to follow that one. That's
Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah. So one of mine was a lot smaller than that. I went very small. I do volunteer. I'm a member of the Junior League of Phoenix here in Arizona. And the group that I am specifically a part of is member appreciation. So and it's a volunteer group, and our whole committee is focused on finding ways for our members to be connected and celebrated. And this past week, what we did is we had a Galentine's social, which I know you will appreciate, Sierra. And my job, I volunteered to participate, to serve as part of this event and lead a certain segment of it. So for me, that was important to me because I recognized it was a fun way to connect with each other, to create a fun environment. I really put a lot of thought and effort into my activity that I had them create. And through that, I think it helped, you had something tangible to show, a heart to show afterwards, but it also created a nice connection and a social event for people, especially, now when it's very tough to do so. So that was my big one that I had focused on for the week.
Excellent one.
Yeah.
Because that's a big part of it, right? And that's kind of what the common thread of this is it's bringing people together, not dividing people. It does seem, based on a 30,000 foot view and based on recent events that we've been seeing, we're not all getting along right now. We've got sort of, if you talk politics, the division is all people who voted for this guy are this, and all people who voted against that guy are this. That's clearly impossible to put 75 million people in one category and then 80 million people in one category. Yet we're doing it with such ease. So the more of us that decide, okay, that's not healthy for a country, a society, a world, let's stop with the easy labels. Let's dig in a little bit. Let's try to get some understanding. And maybe that's where you can come in as a virtuous listener, is to just understand where someone is coming from and maybe why someone would vote for the person you didn't vote for. Just find one reason. Just open that door just a little bit. And I think that that's what we are trying to create here at Painted Porch Strategies, to talk about kind of what we do and how we're trying to increase levels of virtue in the world. We each have our area of specialties that we've created to have these conversations on the porch, whether it's with you as an individual, with your team as a company. So Sierra is our mindfulness Sherpa. So you want to talk about virtue. She can help you get in the right mindset so you can be virtuous most of the time, that you have tools and techniques to be able to use in that regard. Amy is our teamwork expert because she's worked with various different teams in the software industry for quite a long time. So she knows how to interact with people who code versus managers versus goal-oriented people in the office, and then working with the clients as well to get everybody on the same page. Mm-hmm. And then my role is the communication aspect of it, which is exactly what we're talking about here. A huge part of that is listening. So we all have tools and techniques to help you become more virtuous. Things that we've learned along our journeys that we've really focused on that really tie into this lesson. Do whatever political good you can, which is why I loved it so much.
Mm-hmm. I would say one other quick note, even going back to your listening, your virtuous listening, Rob, that you said, maybe even a small challenge or a small task for yourself is the next time you are engaging in some sort of dialogue or disagreement, your challenge is to not respond with with a judgment, but to respond with a question. And that question can't be layered in judgment, like, why would you think that way? But maybe it's simply, help me understand, what is it about this that makes you believe that? Or however you want to answer it. And that in and of itself is just one tiny step towards having a more, a more virtuous conversation or connection with someone else. So it's that little tiny bit. It doesn't have to be this massive gesture. It can be something very small, where the next time you read something that you don't agree with, or you hear something said that you don't agree with, rather than just responding, you pause and you ask why.
Mm-hmm. Dig deeper.
Yeah.
That's where the virtue is.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And separating your emotions from your responses oftentimes.
Creating that space.
And you probably do this more than you think. And just like Amy had to remind me, sometimes you do have to give yourself a little credit. Sometimes you have to be reminded that, oh yeah, you did do this small act today, and that was a virtuous act. And then if you can expand it, great. If you can make it on a bigger scale, great. If you're on a path to become like Malala or Edward Snowden or Martin Luther King or whoever else you look to as a virtuous example, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Right.
starts here.
Yeah.
Well, even use the example when you think about something small that can become something big. Rosa Parks, when she first did not give up, she just thought she was making a choice on a bus to not get up and give up her seat to someone, because she decided she was not going to stand inferior. She had no idea at the time of that decision what a huge impact that would have, but it did. All she was doing was making a single choice in that moment to not give up her seat on the bus, but it had a ripple effect. So small things do have a big impact, especially when, like they're asking us, is it really a selfless act? Is it a pro bono? Are you only doing it to get somewhere? Or are you actually doing it in an act of selflessness? And I think this is part of what the Stoics is. It's not only improve your own virtue, but also think about how you can help other people, how you can benefit and be a productive member of society as well.
Mm-hmm.
Greater good.
Exactly. Because as they constantly remind us, we are all in this together. We're all here to serve and help one another. That's human nature. That's their definition of human nature. It is our nature to serve and help each other.
Yep. And I do love the part where in this lesson, they ask you to dig deeper on yourself as well, to really figure out what your motives are. Because Amy, you had mentioned virtue signaling. We've seen a lot of that over the last year, for
We're all
sure.
guilty of it occasionally.
Yeah, we all are.
I mean, let's be honest.
That's asking that question of yourself. Am I doing this for virtual reasons, or am I doing this to show that I'm virtuous?
With that, I think that's the one thing with social media is it's difficult to find that balance, because sometimes, to your point, Sierra, sharing something on a social network or however, sharing something you may see it as just a virtuous act. I want to share this example of doing good to help possibly inspire others. But that's where it sometimes can get corrupted, because then there's just do it, don't show it, don't talk about it, be about it, right? And so it's trying to find that balance between what could be perceived as signaling versus what is truly authentic virtuous act,
Right.
that you
Well,
just want to share.
What's the intent? It's like, where is the intent? Is the intent actually to shame people, or is the intent to, and that's where I think anything can be perceived anyway. But when you look at, is my intent good? Was Rob's intent with helping Joe finish off his marathon? Was that his intent pure to help Joe? Yes, that was his intention. Now, if he turned around and in the same blog post said, hire me as a marathon training coach for $1,000 a week, now all of a sudden we would be like, was he really doing this to help Joe, or is he trying to launch his new running coaching business? Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right. And it's always that balance, because that can be difficult, because maybe he's an amazing marathon coach and he could help people. And he could help people achieve that goal. And that could be his virtuous path of being a marathon coach. I think about even as us in our business, we have a business. Painted Porch Strategies is a business, the business of helping individuals design a blueprint and leverage tools to create a well-lived life. But, with that we are also, we've created these products, and these products are something that have a monetary value to them. We wish we could give them all away for free. Maybe eventually we will. We try to give away 5% of it for free at least, or give 5% away to charity. But, it's like trying to find that balance of, you want to share the good, but also give the good.
But I think what Sierra said is really important. It's what you feel about people who do the opposite of you that makes a difference. That's the world we live in right now. And that's the personal part of being a Stoic, is that personal struggle, that personal journey to try to arrive as best you can at that virtuous place where you're not judging other people based on their own actions, because you can't control those actions.
So what's the main lesson here, the main takeaway?
For me?
Yeah.
You have the ability to do good every single day. It could be a simple act, or it could be a large act, or somewhere in the middle. But just take those opportunities and really examine how it was good, why it was good, and why it was virtuous.
Yes. And sometimes even starting very small, where your virtuous act is to not act. Remember that as well. You don't have to state your opinion. You don't have to respond. Sometimes pause.
You can just choose your own path quietly.
Exactly. Sometimes silence is amazing. Sierra, what about you? What's your final takeaway?
I really wrote down greater good, fellow man. I think a lot of this is, with as much as we try to work on our own virtue, I think when we look for opportunities that can improve the greater good, I think even just bringing an awareness and an intention to that is a great first step. Not everything that we do is going to have a huge impact all the time. I mean, wouldn't it be great if it did? But I think if you follow and connect with what you find to be true, what you find to be helpful, and you always act with your best intentions at heart, I think a lot of those things will fall naturally into place.
Well said. Well said. On that note, we will do this again next week for week 31. Speaking of, it's a great transition. Act with reservation. So we'll be digging into that right here on our Painted Porch Strategies YouTube channel and Facebook page. So glad that you were able to join us. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts, please share them either in the Facebook page or the comment section down here on the YouTube page as well. And you can find us online at paintedporchstrategies.com to find out more about what we do and how we use Stoicism as an approach to business and life. For Amy, for Sierra, I'm Rob. We'll see you next week.